good day. I'm Joe Brown, and actually today I am substituting in for Lisa Dalton, who is the current president of the Live Theater League of Tarrant County. Lisa is out on a film audition, so we're hoping great things for her. So today, I'm past president of the Live Theater League and a professor of theater arts at Texas Wesleyan. And I have the pleasure today of getting to visit and talk with Jim Covault, who currently is the artistic director at Stage West Theater. So Jim, it's such a pleasure to have you take time from your schedule and come be a part of the history of Tarrant County Theater.
Well, it's a pleasure to do it.
So let's start. Jim Covault. Tell us about Jim Covault and, just some of your history in Fort Worth. I mean, we know of Stage West as Jim Covault and the late Jerry Russell, and you've had a long-term relationship with that theater, but you've done so much work all over as a costumer, designer, director, actor, everything, Renaissance. But let people that are watching the Live Theater League Legacy Project know about Jim Covault.
That's a general topic. Okay. Well, I graduated from TCU and then was in and out for a while and then came back, I guess, late 70s and along with two other people, started another theater about the same time, and Jerry started Stage West, and that wasn't working out entirely well, and so two of us called Jerry and said, hey, we're available if you have anything.
Who were those other two people? Just
Mario Cabrera and Larry Oliver. Yeah. And so Mario and I went and talked to Jerry, and he immediately put us to work on the next show, which was a melodrama whose name I've forgotten, and it was the last time Stage West ever did anything like that. He discovered that was not something any of us wanted to pursue. But it worked. I mean, people came and all, but it was, all that popcorn, And then for a while, I would just sort of refuse to go away, and eventually he put me on staff, and I was associate director for quite a while, and then became artistic director the first time he retired.
The first time Jerry retired.
Yeah, I think there were three. And started initially, I was directing and acting, but then he discovered that I could at least edit costumes, and I started doing that as well, and set design.
Edit costumes.
Yeah. I don't build them, but unless forced to. But I have done some, but and then started doing sets as well. So, and that was part of what I think kept me at Stage West, was that I got to do such a range of things and work on such a range of plays. And so it was always something new.
Well, so when you go so far back to Stage West and to so many different spaces, so how many years and what different phases of Stage West?
I should have warned you, I never know when anything happened
or
how long ago it was.
I'm not worried about dates, but approximate years.
Yeah, so it must be like 36 years maybe, if this is the 37th season.
Most of the theaters in Tarrant County have a 35-year kind of starting point, Stage West being one of them. That's why you're so valuable.
I think we're in the 37th season, if I'm remembering rightly. So it would be 36, I guess. Like I say, on staff for less than that, maybe 33 or something.
But you were at Stage West has a long history of different locations, different financial situations, and you've seen it through many different eras.
Yep. I was there when it was still in the sandwich shop downtown, and then shortly after I arrived, it moved to Vickery, where we are now again. But then I guess it would have been in the 80s, initially partly because they were planning to, with the I-30 expansion and stuff, it was uncertain how accessible we were going to be, and then eventually they apparently even took the back part of the building with planning to run Vickery through there, and they didn't end up doing that. But so Then we moved to what's now the 4-day weekend theater space in Caravan of Dreams.
In Sundance, yeah.
And at their suggestion. And we're there for 3 years, I guess, maybe 4.
And the offices, if I remember right, the executive offices were in a different building off
Yeah, they were
7th
down on
Street.
7th. There's an
Yeah.
ad agency in there now.
Yeah.
Fort Worth Weekly was
Yeah.
there for a while,
Yeah.
but yeah, that building down on 7th. And we built scenery there too, and then moved it to Caravan of Dreams, which is always interesting because their freight elevator is not large.
Yeah, and I think some of your tech kids were some of my students
Yes,
back
they
then,
were.
and the challenges that went from one space and
Oh, yeah.
downtown and up and all that
Oh, yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And then partly because the Sundance Squares people's emphasis was shifting, and because originally the downstairs at Caravan of Dreams was a jazz venue. Had great classic jazz people coming through there, and all they started switching to rock bands, and the competition sound-wise became kind of extreme, and amongst other issues, and we decided it was, well, Jerry decided it was time to move, and ended up at the old TCU movie theater on University. I think because he passed it all the time, because he lived near there, so he was aware of it, and said, oh, this would be a good place. So, and so we went there, and were there 10 years maybe?
Yeah, and actually when you took over the old TCU theater, which actually was torn down, I guess, for the bookstore now,
Yes.
you all actually also expanded within that space, if I remember right, to have a larger
we
lounge
were,
and
yeah,
bar area
yeah,
too.
there was the space next door,
Yeah.
which apparently which we basically used as a bar, and one night a week did food service. 'Cause originally, Stage West had food service when I was at the sandwich shop, and the whole time we were on Vickery, originally in a sort of dinner theater arrangement, but then it, after maybe a couple of years, switched it to where the food service happened out front. Probably because there were some plays where that just didn't seem to go well with the eating and drinking concept right there.
If I remember right, because again, I go so far back, when Stage West was in its first time on Vickery, the main theater often changed configurations quite a bit.
Yeah.
And then when you moved to the TCU theater, it became a little more traditional, of kind of more of a three-sided thing, a little more
Right.
static there within what you were doing in that space.
Right. It was originally a thrust on one of the side walls. I'm not sure why Jerry opted for that configuration. And after maybe 3 or 4 years of that, I finally said, look, maybe we should consider just making this arena, because a lot of money was going on to sets which basically had to be almost flat against the back wall. There was no backstage space. And it was odd to work with, and it was odd for audiences in the side sections. Sometimes we tried to play to all of them, but we decided it would just be easier to make it arena, and so it was arena for the rest of its time there. The one side where the stage had been previously was not large. I think it was just 2 or 3 rows, but at least it made that work better. Yeah.
And really the focus has always been, when you think of Stage West, you think of plays no one else has ever seen, and the quality of the acting and the directing, and I mean production values within a very intimate scale with relationship to the audience.
Yeah, it's always been pretty actor-centered, I would say.
Yeah.
You know.
So University, TCU Theater, and then within the history of the many years.
Right, because there was a financial crisis there after there was a merger with Shakespeare in the Park, which lasted, I guess, 2 and a part years, which was done in by lack of funding support, basically, and I think that was largely because of 9/11.
There were some economic times for all the theaters back then.
Yeah, the funding picture changed utterly there for a while, and the Shakespeare and the park side of it became non-viable at that point. And then eventually decided that was during one of Jerry's retirement periods, and he came back and decided that in fact we should sell that building, and then the Community Arts Center was just developing their theater, their small theater space there. And so we became, although not officially, but we were basically the resident company there for a while and had our offices there.
Yeah, and worked mainly, I remember, I think was one of the first shows there, I think Joel Farrell directed Little Shop of Horrors
Yes.
on the big space.
Yes, we did some things.
But
in the
mainly
main stage
based
as well.
out of what is now the
Sanders.
Theater.
Right,
It
yeah.
used to be the green room or the atrium of the Fort Worth
Right,
Modern, but some great stuff happened in that space.
right, yeah. And then we concluded that we needed to move because audiences were declining there, and talking to people, it was partly location based, because then that parking garage didn't exist, and parking could be extraordinarily difficult sometimes.
And they started charging for parking by then too. I know that was part of the reasons we've had within there.
No, I don't think so. But what would happen is on a weekend there would be a gun show or something,
Yes.
and there was like no place, 0 parking spaces. Or you had to just drive around for ages waiting for somebody to leave, and it was so frustrating for people. And I think that combined with other things, and we didn't have an alcohol.
Plus, it really wasn't your space.
No.
It was a found space, but not what we had known and loved for Stage West, with its own, really its
Right.
own stamp and personality.
Right. Yeah. It had, by default, it just had to remain pretty neutral, except for the sets and things. But otherwise, yeah. And we didn't have a beer and wine license or anything, so it was all like sodas and candy out front.
Sodas and candy.
And people like all that. And I still think it's an interesting place to work, because that's a totally flexible space, and it wasn't really so much the space that made us move as just the context. Yeah, and oddly enough, the Vickery space, the man who owned it at that point, who had owned it when we were there before, got in touch with Jerry and said he understood we were looking, and that was available, because the city had given him back, or the state or whoever had it, had given him back
Because they redirected the highway.
right, and then didn't put Vickery back there, and so the back part of the building, which had never been used for anything else, it was still just sitting there. So we went, and Jerry, and I think he felt the same. We were both like, don't need to be going back there, and then he went and looked at it and said, no, you should come look. And they had taken out, people who had been in there in the meantime, had taken out the drop ceiling in the front, so the whole lobby area was much different, the high ceilings and things, and it just felt different. And of course, it's a space, it was a bus barn and thing originally, but it's a rare space in that it has a fairly wide space with no interior columns, and that's its attraction theater-wise.
I mean, and there were still things on that wall that were there when
Yes.
Stage West had been there the first time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, particularly upstairs in some of the storage area and stuff, there were things that had been there. And even in the theater space, there were still things that had never moved. And that was, 20 years at least.
Yeah. Wow.
So
When you went back to the original Vickery, but that's grown.
yes.
And it's not the same theater, obviously,
Yeah.
there within staffing and spaces and all
Right.
that. It's pretty exciting.
Certainly, when we moved back there, we did a major renovation on it at that point. And then, I guess, in 2011, we also started leasing the space next door, which is a mirror of that space.
Yeah, on the west side.
On the west side of it. After considerable debate to convince the board that it would indeed pay for itself. And put offices over there and do all the education stuff over there, and put a shop over there, a scene shop, where we could replicate the stage and build things there. And previously, we'd always had to build sets on stage.
On stage.
And that meant there was inevitably gaps between shows and things while rehearsals and set construction took place. And we could narrow that gap if they could build things in the shop in sections that they could move over and not have such a turnaround time on stage. And so that enabled us to do more things on stage. And then we developed a studio space originally in a very temporary way, but kept adding to it, and have recently done a major redo on that to where it could be, if, I'm not sure what its maximum seating is now, but it's increased somewhat, and it certainly could, it could rival the main space. They may be more or less equivalent audience-wise. It's a thrust situation unless you...
So you have at least twice as much or more space now in what we'll call the new Vickery space for Stage West than when you were there previously.
Yes, yeah, exactly twice as much.
And even now, that whole area is redeveloped with medical and apartments, and Amphibian now is just kind of around the corner, and there's a whole new energy of art going on in that area of Fort Worth.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all marching that direction.
Yeah.
There's still a bit of a gap between us and the whole Magnolia thing that's creeping our way, but we have new lofts just down the street, and the distillery on the next corner and all that. So yeah, it's the neighborhood's definitely changing. And
what do you think Jerry would say about looking at all of this and what's happened in the tragic loss of Jerry? What do you think Jerry would say within what's happening now with his, as the founder of Stage West, and you really have been there the long time too? What would Jerry have to say about this?
I think he'd be delighted.
Yeah.
I mean, particularly to have those two spaces, and they're very different, and you know, the budget's grown considerably since we moved back there.
And the staff.
Yeah, and the staff, yeah. I'm not sure what the budget was when we moved back there, but I would imagine it's probably doubled by now. It's almost $1 million now, if not more next year. I don't know what will happen next year.
Because you've had, at Stage West, you've had some staff there that have been really loyal employees and seen it through a lot. I mean,
yes. Yeah.
Peggy.
Peggy Kruger O'Brien, who's our stage manager and company manager, has been there. She was joined as a stage manager when we were on university. I'm not sure what year. And of course, her husband, who
Michael.
She met at Stage West, I think, or at least married while they were at Stage West. He was there for like 35 years too, or 30-some years.
Yeah.
And
Lynn Lovett's been with you all doing props.
And she did box office for a while and development for a while.
Of course, Susie McLaughlin.
Yes, who was Jerry's wife when the theater was founded, and I guess she remained his wife. But they were separated for a long time. Yeah, she was absolutely instrumental in the early stages, and then stepped back a bit, but she's still there. She's.
You really can't talk about, I mean, Circle and Stage West are really what we consider to be children of the Fort Worth Theater proper, and Bill Garber, and we've known those, but I've never talked about, did you do anything within the Fort Worth Theater productions, act, direct, within all the things you've done?
Not a lot. I think I was in one show there because the director called me, and they were having to replace someone, and he thought if we had said, you can do this, and I did. This was before Stage West. And maybe one other, but I was never very much involved there. I knew Bill, of course.
Yeah.
My young activity in theater was more at Casa Mañana. I was an apprentice there, when I was in high school. And
I don't think many people know that.
yeah. Well, it's still some of the most fun I've ever had in theater. Cause,
well, now, where did you go to high school?
Poly.
We've never talked about that.
Yeah, just over there, yeah.
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 Well, let's go back to Jim Covault a minute, because so many years of being a designer and a director and an incredible actor, and I mean, people, when you're in the Jeeves series that Stage West does, people, fight to get tickets, but so many roles, but what would be one or two of your most favorite roles you've ever played as an actor? And I mean, you've done Shakespeare in the Park, you've done
Right.
Stage West, but something within, as you look back, you have a vast resume. Favorite roles or memorable roles for some
Yeah,
reason?
sure. I don't tend to think about favorite ones too much, but there's certainly Jeeves as one, and it's just a thing people constantly recognize me for. They stop me in
When you're at
stores
the
and
grocery
things. Yeah. Inevitably, when you're looking your worst, and you come around the corner and says, "Oh, I just loved you as Jeeves," and then they insist on talking to you for a while. And you're going, no.
But that's the charm of Fort Worth.
It
That's
is.
such the charm of our city. Yeah.
Sure. And I think Travels with My Aunt, that
Okay.
show, I love doing that. Goodness. I know there are others that...
What about Shakespeare? Your favorite role you were cast in Shakespeare?
Yeah, I've done more Shakespeare directing than acting, but I would think probably Oberon in Midsummer Night's Dream,
okay.
Shakespeare in the Park. And other acting roles, I know there are ones, because somebody else asked me this just the other day, and then they supplied a couple of possibilities, and I was like, yes, you're absolutely right, that was one. But like I say, I'm not good at keeping memorabilia.
Well, what about directing? Because again, I'll go through the list. What would be a show that you really enjoyed, or for what a memorable show because you directed so many things too? I mean, you're an actor, director, designer,
Right.
So.
Yeah. Oh, I did think of another acting one, The Weir, which we did at
The Weir,
when we were on university. Collection of Irish ghost stories with an agenda that it saves up for the end. But directing-wise, well, probably the production of Our Town that we did when we were on university. And A Streetcar Named Desire there. Which is odd because I'm not a huge Tennessee Williams fan, but I was really pleased with the way that turned out. And other directing things, I know there are certainly recent things, but they're like I'm just not good at remembering.
Well, you've done so many.
Yeah, absolutely, and I know people. Like Michael O'Brien can tell you what gel colors he used in a show 20 years ago. He really can, and I'm not good. I have limited storage space. Once I'm done with a thing.
Well, you move on to the next project.
Yeah.
Art is fluid, and it's a new project and new thoughts.
Yeah.
Local, I don't want to say favorite, but an actor or actress that you enjoy working with from the local community, because you work with so many professionals.
Sure. Well, of course, Jerry was always a delight to work with.
People couldn't wait if you two were involved, either actor, director, actor, or both on stage. I mean, that was just part of the history of the Fort Worth.
Yeah,
It makes it so special.
It was certainly fun on the rare occasions when we were both in a show. That didn't happen a lot.
What shows that you and Jerry were both in?
We were both in The Seafarer on University, which I guess might be another of my favorites, actually. And previously there, I remember the one about Thomas More. What's it called?
A Man for All Seasons.
A Man for All Seasons, yeah. And A Walk in the Woods, which was a big thing.
At the original Vickery space.
Yeah, at the original Vickery,
I think one of my kids designed that, too, there.
Yes.
Nelson Robinson.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
Yes, with trees that were also missiles in the background. Yes. Yeah. And that was a great experience. And let's see, other people, goodness, I hate to say.
You're afraid you're going to leave
'Cause
someone
it
out. If
implies
someone's watching this
that-
tape, it's someone you leave
well,
out. But
why
again,
didn't he mention me? Garrett Storms, who's currently our marketing and production associate, is always a pleasure to work with, and very. And I've both directed and acted with him when we did New Jerusalem, which is the first show he did with us. And, There's too many actors that I like working
Yeah.
with to get into listing them. I mean, the ones that are occurring to me are ones I work with frequently because,
So-
you know, but
Let's go back again to Jim Covault. And do you consider yourself, because your resume is so extensive, I mean, when we have a student come to Wesley and we'll say, what do you want to do? Or you, not to classify them in anything because you can't be classified, but would you say you're an actor that directs or a director that acts and designs? I mean, do you have a feeling for where your passions are the most? Because you do everything. I mean, I don't think you've done lights, but you do very interesting and out-of-the-box creative sets, and especially I call your costumes Covaultian. No matter what period, modern or period, there's always an interesting eye you bring to it that I fondly
that's
say
good. Yeah,
it's a Covaultian design, and I say that with great admiration. But where do you consider yourself to be classified?
I guess I would probably be a director first, so it would
Okay.
be a director who acts also. But I could easily argue that the other way around. But the design things, I think, tend to be more peripheral to that. Than I would not label myself as a designer first. Although I certainly enjoy doing it, and particularly if it's something that has a challenge to it, not just your, here, replicate this living room, but something that's you have to get more creative with. And likewise with costumes, and if it's something that, I think the first time Jerry had me do costumes was for Three Penny Opera, and
Oh, wow.
and
Perfect.
yeah, and we had a whole lot of costume stock. Mostly it was things people had given us, you know, and so my approach there was I picked out a bunch of stuff and brought it out and had the actors come up, and I would say, okay, what of this? Look, you might like this. What do you think? And they sort of collaborated in building those costumes, and that was fun. I'm going to like taking that approach with costumes to bring things to actors and say, does this work for you? You know?
Well, since our plan is to put these interviews where the public can see them do research, so at this point today on April 26th, 27th, I think it's known that you are retiring full-time from Stage West as artistic director,
Right.
but certainly not leaving the artistic scene. And of course, Jerry, the joke on Jerry was he retired, 3 times?
He did, yeah.
But, you know, that's going to give you some different flexibility and freedom. I mean, what are
Right.
your hopes and goals for the next phase of your life in Fort Worth Theater, the Fort Worth Theater scene,
Well,
County Theater scene?
I would certainly hope to keep acting and directing at Stage West, but hopefully other places as well. And, well, design for that matter, if somebody asks me. And in conversation with some people about maybe developing another company as well. So that's not, knowing that this is going into a vault at the moment,
Yeah.
that's not like for publication at
Sure.
this point, but it would be a very different thing, not just a Stage West replica or anything.
Well, speaking of, companies, in the time you've been in, we call it Tarrant County or Fort Worth, how do you think theater has changed, or has it? What are your
Oh,
thoughts
sure
about
it
the theater
has,
scene?
yeah. Early on, there was Fort Worth Theater, a large-scale community theater, which basically does not exist now. Not just Fort Worth Theater, there is no
Large community
large
theater.
community theater here, which is kind of odd in a city this size. I suppose some of that energy then got dissipated into the companies who are like Stage West, who are partial Actors Equity casts and partial, although Stage West has always paid everyone. The basic difference with community being that they don't pay actors, and it's a different, it has a whole different way of approaching things, I think, and a good thing. I mean, I do layout and design for the American Association of Community Theaters bi-monthly magazine, Spotlight, and so I see a lot of material about community theaters all over the country all the time, and I have a huge respect for that, and I think it is kind of odd that nothing ever took Fort Worth
within
Theater's
Fort
place.
Worth's legacy, even that makes it so different than Dallas. We talk about Fort Worth Theater beget Stage West, beget Circle,
Right.
beget this. I mean, Casa Mañana was the professional theater, and you had Fort Worth Theater, and then Hip Pocket started, and then we have each
Right.
theater really within an area that's been 35 to 38 years in these decades. That's why it's so important
Yes.
for wanting to document this.
Yeah. And that's all there was then, until well, basically, I think until Jerry started Stage West, there were no other professional theaters. There was Casa Mañana, and it was summer or the children's things. And so there was no professional theater that was doing straight plays. And although Stage West did more musicals also, as well as straight plays then. And so that was the beginning of a huge change. Now there's Jubilee and Circle and Hip Pocket, of course, which is its own separate
Amphibian.
animal, and Amphibian.
And then we have the HEB theaters
Right,
that
all
are
that,
still
yeah.
community theaters that are highly engaged within
Right.
that own area
Right.
of Tarrant County.
Right.
But, you know, the whole wonderful story about how, I think, what was it, $50 in a Passion with Jerry, that with the sandwich shop in the corner, and to take the risk.
Yes, I expect it was
see-
more than $50.
Yeah, well,
but yeah.
I think the story was $50
Yeah.
or something on his credit card.
Yes.
And
Yes.
then as the Stage West family expanded, and it was really Jerry and Jim and then Susie, and then to look at where it was and where it is now is really a wonderful story in the
is.
history of Fort Worth
It
Theater.
is, and it'll be interesting to see where it goes, and where, I mean, you see people saying that the whole model of the nonprofit regional theater model is maybe not going to keep working. I don't know. It will be interesting to see what happens with that, because it's very much part of that. I mean, it is dependent on not just individual donations, but foundations and things like that for a significant piece of income. And I think all those theaters are, and it's dependent on that model continuing to work. And I hope it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. If not, things will shift again.
How do you think, in the time you've been in theater in Fort Worth, our audiences have changed? Within audience and age and available money to support theater? What's your thoughts about, you've seen a lot of it in the time, and different
Yeah.
strategies for marketing, and
Sure.
Stage West has always been known because of its plays no one else has really seen before. You look hard to find stuff that is not well known, and
Right. We sometimes joke that there's maybe 10 plays that you can be sure that a large number of people here will know. So ones that are unknown cover.
well, and Circle's kind of the same thing.
Yeah,
They're-
absolutely.
You and Circle, and Amphibian really now are all kind of known to bring in cutting-edge work that's not necessarily been seen, and you work
Right.
hard to find those right scripts.
Yes, absolutely. And we make an effort to do a number of world premieres, to work with original scripts, which I hope will continue to grow. And that's a big focus at Amphibian as well. Yeah, audiences, well, of course, looking at them, they've grown older as we
They've
have.
not got, the younger ones aren't coming. It's still
Well, that depends. I
Okay.
mean, we make effort to make that happen, because obviously eventually the other people will all die or become too feeble to come to the theater. So,
and the news currently said millennials now outnumber baby boomers.
yes,
And as a theater educator, our job is to keep people
yes.
coming into theater
Right.
and buying tickets and enjoying
Right.
the art.
And we find that there was a string of shows where we definitely noticed we had substantially higher proportion of younger audience, which is a good thing. I mean, we do keep trying to aim marketing to do that, you know, using more social media and all that, which everyone does, and how to make that work. And for whatever reason, it does appear that we've been successful at that. Some shows, then it's we retrograde back to average age 65. But I think we are seeing some younger. I mean, you have a show like Mr. Burns, for instance, brought in a lot of younger people, as did Bad Jews, whose entire cast was...
And I think you said a key thing. The days of buying ads in the newspaper are long gone. The Live Theater League used to buy an ad for all the theaters in the Star Telegram, and it was a fortune. But it's social media. That's what's really reaching out so quickly.
Yes, I mean, we hadn't for quite a while, but we are using the Star Telegram again, both online and in print. And I think that still has an impact. A certain element of the theater audience is obviously still reading the paper because reviews do seem to matter. Sometimes we're glad of that and sometimes not. And there have been a couple of occasions recently when, hopefully partly because of our own marketing, we have been able to overcome a negative review and get really excellent attendance in spite of a negative review from the Star Telegram, which used to be the key thing. If something seriously negative there was going to have a seriously bad impact. And we have managed to overcome that a couple of times lately. Although I think we've overcome it in the other way too. Sometimes we've had small audiences for shows that got great reviews, so you never know.
Well, and I mean, I think at one time we had 21 or 22 theaters that were members of the Live Theater League, and then I think now we're at about 17. So you have a lot of theaters competing for the same dollars, and that's always going to be the challenge.
Yeah, and I don't know what percentage of the general public goes to theater here, but it's certainly not large. And so, yeah, you're competing for a core group of people. And we do keep acquiring people who move here because of jobs or whatever, who are maybe coming from places where theater is more a part of the culture, but a wider range of people go, and a lot of them are millennials who then look for theater to go to because they came from D.C. and they were going to Woolly Mammoth or whatever. We hope they'll find us and Amphibian and Circle who are doing that sort of thing. But we are picking up a certain element of that, I think.
I mean, they have to for survival. Switch a little direction here. I mean, I've taught college theater for 38 years, and I always talk when I talk to kids about, and I do this as a class with freshmen about getting them to think like, okay, what do you want to be remembered for? Meaning, okay, you're 18, but flash forward for 40 years of giving and raising family or working or artistry or business, what do you want people to remember you for? And I have what I hope people would remember me for as an educator artist. But, you're starting a new branch of your artistic life tree within not the full-time artistic director, but so much more things you can do, freedoms to expand. But when people hear the word Jim Covault, what do you want people to think or say about Jim Covault, the person, the artist, the man?
Well, I mean, I really think my central drive doing it is to share interesting things that I find in theater texts or, whatever, to say, oh, this is a brilliant play, you need to see this, and to find ways to share that in the best possible way, to get potential audiences to see what it is that's great about it. And so really I would hope if they think of my name, they just think of really interesting theater experiences of a wide range. I'm not, I used to say, this is almost true. I used to say I would just as soon be like one of the people who did the carvings on Gothic cathedrals, no one knows their names. You know, they were doing amazing work, but it's the work you see. Because theater doesn't hang around for you to see it, but I'm not so much concerned about what they think about me. I would just hope that I'll have brought them some experiences that they will remember.
What I respect so much, well, one, your artistry and vision as a director, much less what you bring to a character as an actor, and of course the intellectual ability, but that's one side of the brain. But then we flip to the other side and we see these incredibly innovative sets and costumes, much less the vision you bring to directing. And so it's, I mean, both, as we do left brain, right brain, both sides are so much working here within bringing all of that to the production of a show. To me, that is part of what makes Jim Covault who you are in our history here, to me.
Yeah, and it's been a great opportunity to be able to do that. Yeah. You know, I mean, it's a very rare person who could manage that sort of career in New York. Say, you're going to be a director. You're not going to be doing all those things, probably, unless you're running some minuscule company there. You know, but and I think that's true in a lot of places. It was good to find a situation where I could do all those things, because it's, all of them are extremely rewarding in different ways.
So as we learned in this time about Jim Covault in Stage West, any other thoughts that we would have talked about within Tarrant County Theater, people you know, any thoughts there to round out this interview about, you know, you are a legacy, a living legacy of theater in Fort Worth, have worked with so many people at the heart of when theater was being created and continues to grow. You're still going to grow with it, but any thoughts you want to leave our audience with?
Oh, heavens, I never know the answer to that sort of question. I mean, I do think it looks to me like Dana Schultes and Mark Shum, who will be, and Dana's now the executive producer at Stage West, or director, or whatever, and Mark is the business manager, and it looks like they're heading Stage West in a very interesting
direction. And I mean, I'm proud because Dana was a student at Wesleyan, and because she Jerry directed for us here, and then he would take our kids there. I mean, that's part of what I think makes the Fort Worth theater scene so vibrant within the UTA kids, the kids from TCU that get involved in the theater, and the theaters embrace them so.
Right, absolutely, and that continues to happen with us. We did a co-production with TCU last year, and perhaps we'll find occasion to do one with Wesleyan.
We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
And we do constantly have students or recent graduates coming through there, and I think, that's a great thing. It's good that those two schools are here, and I think it makes a big difference to local theater. And we can call Harry at TCU, we can call Brian and say, we need someone to do this. Do you know someone? Or do you?
Which is another part of what I think makes Tarrant County so special in the relationships we have.
Right.
I think as we try to do our legacy project, we try to keep these at about 50 minutes, as you would a television show. And we have had the pleasure of learning more about Jim Covault the man, Jim Covault the artist and designer, and the involvement in Stage West in Tarrant County. Thank you again, Jim, for your time.
Sure.
And
You're certainly
expertise.
welcome.